Adelaide Grunewald. I work with the College of Western Idaho. And what if I told you that there is no one true self? And depending on what field you work in, you're either going, well, yes, of course, everybody knows that, or you're going, oh gosh, this is clickbait. I should have gone to one of the other presentations, but hear me out because there's actually a lot of backing for this. So, uh, if this isn't something that you're necessarily unfamiliar with, in fact, the idea of having different presentations of yourself is something that we use all the time. In fact, this is a skill we develop, into adulthood and beyond that we're constantly working on. Like, think about how you conduct yourself with family versus with friends, whether you're at work versus you're at school. Think about how you're conducting yourself right now at this conference, because right now you're not just representing yourself, you're representing your school. So of course, you're on your best behavior. Not to say that you're not well behaved elsewhere, but there's something to be said for how you are presenting yourself in different rhetorical situations. Now, you, of course, are changing these presentations of yourself based on the situation you're in. And I take us through this whole preamble today to say that this whole presentation is based around this concept. And the entire point of what we're doing today is to basically help you strategically build these presentations so you can intentionally present yourself as needed for different, situations, whether it be something in school, something at work, an interpersonal conflict, anything like that. So this is a skill set that's going to not just help you as a tutor, it's something you can also help teach your students if you tutor anything in communications or really any course that has people doing a speech of any kind. This kind of thing can come in handy. But it also can help you with, basically job interviews, anything else that you're involved in. So there's a lot of cross application for this. And, myself, I have a bachelor's in communications. I have multiple years of experience with the speech and debate team here at CWI and at ISU. And I have multiple years of experience as a tutor. So my hope is that I have condensed enough of my own teachings down into a presentation that we can get through, and this can be helpful and beneficial for all of you. So with this information, my goal is to help you play your best self. So let's go ahead and get started. Roadmap wise, what we're going to go over here today is I want to talk about the concept and theory and psychology of basically the academic backing of what I'm talking about today. Then we'll talk about getting into character, and I'll get into more specific what I mean by that when we get there. Then we'll do an interactive exercise I call Build an Orator or Orator, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Really looking forward to that. We have a fair bit of time set aside for that. And then finally, we'll end on just some application tips, both for tutors and for students, because it's going to be a little different based on who you are. I should note, as you can tell, I'm not just sitting on my computer. I have this whole elaborate setup so I can move around and work the room. And as such, I'm not going to have a great eyes on the chat. So, Kim, my moderator, if anyone drops any questions or anything in the chat, please verbally let me know. And so I can either check it or we can read it out so I can acknowledge people in a timely manner. So with that, let's go ahead and get into the psychology of being the speaker you want to be, which all hinges on something called communication theory of identity. The communications theory of identity, or CTI as I will refer to it henceforth for the sake of time, asserts that identity itself is a communicative process, meaning it is something that we actively communicate based on circumstance. And this was established by Michael Hecht. Sometime in the 1980s, it was something he worked on over that entire decade. So I don't have a key time of hey, yes, this is when the theory was established. But it's been in the works for a while now and gets referenced a lot. And there's a lot of very intricate parts about it. And unfortunately, we don't have time to go through all of this. I only have 50 minutes and I want to focus on the part that's applicable to us. So while it is an interesting theory that I highly recommend you look up on your own time, we're just going to focus in on just these two bits. Identities involve both subjective and ascribed meaning, and identities are a source of expectations and motivations. And what's really important about this is that this is both external and internal. So when you fit an identity, and you're, say, presenting to an academic conference, my identity as a presenter therefore informs your expectations of me. My identity as a presenter also informs my own expectations of myself. This changes how I behave, how I speak, how I use my gestures. I'm falling back into speech and debate mode right now because that's where a lot of my bread and butter speaking skills come from. So let's say you don't have a ton of speech and debate practice like I do. How are we going to best approach this? Going into specifics within the theory for a moment, a specific quote from a book that references CTI shows that if people are asked to present themselves favorably to others, their self-evaluation increases. But if they are asked to present themselves in a negative light, their self-evaluation decreases, which again hinges on that, positive projection leads to positive outcomes. This isn't just wishful thinking. There is scientific backing. Psychologically, if you're putting your best foot forward, you're going to feel better about yourself versus if you are intentionally kneecapping yourself or presenting yourself in a way that is perhaps inauthentic or you think maybe doesn't fit the situation you're in, you're not going to be as confident, which therefore is going to lead to this self-fulfilling cycle of you're not presenting the absolute best you could, and therefore you don't feel like you're doing the best you could, and then everyone else in the room is going to read that, and they're going to know. So, going off of that, public speaking is inherently a performance. So you are filling the role of presenter. I'm going to head over here now. You are filling the role of presenter, right? As the producer of your speech, you decide what the public speaker looks like. So you're not just the actor in this sense. You are the producer, the director, the writer. You are in charge of this entire operation. As such, your aim then is to develop a persona for yourself that fills the style of speaker that you've chosen. So when you decide what a good public speaker for this situation looks like, you are in charge of filling that role yourself. So you need to pick something that you're capable of. Going off of that then, when it comes to actually like getting into character, right, and figuring out the kind of presenter you want to be, you have to think about it in the sense of you are finding a label that works for you, right? And that's going to depend a lot on if you're someone who's comfortable public speaking or presenting to groups or even just working in a group context, or if this is something that you're not as familiar with, that's going to change how you approach this step. So for instance, if you're a really experienced speaker, if you've been in speech and debate or anything, maybe you were in theater as a kid in high school, that's going to come a little more naturally to you. So at that point, you might shift into, speeching mode. You might put on your speaking hat in that sense. That's inherently you yourself are presenting yourself as a speaker versus if you're not familiar with it, right? Which most people aren't. That's okay. If you take any communications course, every comm instructor's favorite fun fact is that public speaking is the statistically number 2 biggest fear in the United States, behind a number 1 being death. You will hear that in every comm class because it's kind of a fun statistic, but it's true. And it's a really good way to alleviate that pressure where you're sitting there going, oh, I have to speak in front of people. Everyone's thinking that. Everyone's worked up about this. It's okay. It's not just you. You're going to do great. So when you're not as familiar with this, then you might get inside a speaker's head or get into speaking character, right? Which inherently, compared to those first metaphors, is almost more other. You are shifting into this character that can speak as opposed to just shifting in a version of yourself as you can speak. And whichever one of those works best for you, that's what's important. You should stick with what works best for you. Now, consider who you're playing in this context, right? Like things like mannerisms and speech patterns, how you dress, how you present yourself are all important. Don't over-engineer it. It can be easy if you're like really getting into this to take it almost too far and get so caught up in the nitty-gritty that you kind of lose that you're supposed to be just speaking to a group of people. So like don't if you say maybe you're more soft spoken, right? You're not very good at projecting your voice. Don't try to present as someone who's super boisterous, right? You're not a ringleader. If you can't get your voice to carry, don't try because you will then basically set yourself up to feel awkward when your voice isn't carrying the way you want to. Instead, you need to leverage your strengths, right? And sometimes that comes down to, maybe you're a better writer than a speaker. So make sure that your written portion of your speech, right, your outline, your script, however you want to present it, is well written and well rehearsed. That you know that front, back, left to right, you probably don't even need the paper in your hands at that point because then you can fall back on what you're saying and you are comfortable with how you've written it. Also, you know, try to keep with what is appropriate for the topic, right? If you're covering something super heavy, try to, have some level of seriousness and respect for it. If it's a lighter topic or something that's not like say you did a speech on hybrid vehicles, right? That's not a super intense topic that's required. You can have some levity with that, basically. So be cognizant about how you're presenting and how you are approaching the topic of your speech. Going off of that, then, I want to take us into the portion of the presentation where we build an orator. So I have a QR code here, and if the QR code doesn't work for you, that is fine. Moderator is putting a link in the chat. Both of those should work. If you do the QR code, then you can just do it off your phone and leave Zoom up on your computer. If you do it on your computer, you can just have it open in a separate tab. We're going to get into basically, I'm going to give you a rhetorical situation, right? So this will be who you're presenting to, the topic of your speech, and the reason you're giving it. Then I'm going to switch this over to poll everywhere, and I want you guys, the audience, to put in instances of like traits or maybe methods that, going off of what I've talked about, would work for that situation. I have about 4 planned. Depending on how long we go, we might not get to all 4. That's okay. The important thing is that we get that discussion and thinking going. They're fairly diverse. Before I move on, is anyone having any technical difficulties getting into the poll? It hasn't been activated yet, so it might not let you enter anything. If that's the case, that's okay. Once I activate it, it should be fine. Also, I found that if you put in spaces between things, it'll kind of separate your words because it's one of those word cloud activities. So if you put in like project voice, project's going to pop up on one side and voice is going to pop up on the other. That's okay. We'll work with it. Going off of that, any technical issues connecting to this? What's up?
I think we're good, Addie.
Fantastic. All right. So let me take us out of this presentation. Actually, no, not quite yet. I'm going to show us our first rhetorical situation, and then I'll take us to the poll everywhere section where we'll have our discussion. So first off, this is Michael Hecht. This is the gentleman who basically theorized the communication theory of identity. So he's kind of important. So for our first activity, our audience is first semester and dual credit college students, right? These are like freshmen. This is like baby's first, course. Our topic is what to expect for an English 101 course, and our purpose is to inform them of course expectations and ease their concerns regarding passing and getting a good grade, right? It's fair to consume if this is their first college course, they might be a little intimidated by it. So we want to present the information in a way that is easily understandable but isn't stressful for them. We don't want to overload it. So with that, if anyone needs this information again, just ask. I've got it written down. I can reread it out. But I'm going to go ahead and switch our view over to the poll everywhere and get that turned on. We're going to activate. So now you guys are free to start throwing things up on the screen here.
Looks good. That opened the questions.
Huh?
I said it looks good. It opened the questions, so that worked.
Awesome. Perfect. So, outlines, welcoming. Okay. There we go. Now they're coming in. Sympathetic. That's a really good one, right? Especially if we're talking in the context of like, again, first semester, we're fresh out of high school, maybe we're a little stressed. Welcoming, getting bigger and bigger. We love to see that. Calm, very good. Humor. Okay. Humor's an interesting one, right? Because humor is super subjective. So you might try to think you're adding levity, but it might flop. Humor is a really helpful tool. It's also a little inherently risky. Concise, very good. We have lots of good stuff coming in. I love welcoming is just welcoming. During reinforcing good vibes. Clever way to get around the way it breaks them up. Yeah, no, good vibes is important, right? That sounds like almost a little silly, but if you can present as an instructor to these students that like, hey, you're on their side, you're not here to cover their paper in red and, fail them, you want them to do well and succeed, that's going to lower the stress a lot. Smile, very good. I like this activity. I just wish the letters would or the words wouldn't move around constantly. There it goes again. There we go. Okay. So I'm also seeing, keeps getting mixed up in here, but I see one about relating to the students. I think that's important, but rather than me going, yes, this is important as to why. Would anyone, it could be the person who wrote it in. It could also be someone who didn't write it in, but thinks that's a good idea. What's one of the big strengths of relating to your students?
I see a comment in the chat that says comfort and humanity from Jeremy.
Yes, yeah, humanity is a good one. Like, it feels like a no-brainer, but I think again, it can be an intimidating situation. So acknowledging we're all human, you're gonna make mistakes, that's part of learning, that's okay, is super, super important to lowering the stress. Especially because as a society, we frown on failing so much because you failed, you did bad. But failing is how we learn from things. Like you learn so much more from making a mistake than you do from succeeding. So, and if the whole point of being here is to learn, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. We got authentic, yeah, hostile free. Again, just putting out that again, those like good vibes, presenting in a way that is not going to stress people out. Okay, I'm going to take us over to I'm gonna take us to the second one because the second one's got a little bit more to it, and that might be a little bit more interesting for some people.
Just super quick, I just want to say that like when you were saying about what's important about connecting with them, that like showing or letting the students know in the beginning that like, hey, I was where you're at, I was scared too, but we can get through this. Like it's letting them know that like it's okay to feel that way, but also like subconsciously, if they hear that, wow, this person was scared too, but look where they are now, that like helps them to feel more like I can do that too.
I love that observation because like especially if maybe someone who's coming into this maybe hasn't done super well in school in the past, it can be really, really stressful. So I really like that pointing out that it just as an instructor going, hey, I've been where you're at. It's okay. We'll get through it. I have empathy for where you are and I want you to succeed. And look where I am now. That is huge. Even if you don't come out and verbally say that part, like subconsciously, they're going to pick up on, oh yeah, they had those same struggles. So no, that's a really good observation. I really like that. Thank you for including that. I'm gonna take us over here. We're gonna go to our next one. So project number 2, a little different. Community college faculty is our audience. Topic: why discussion board assignments are counterproductive to learning. For specific context here, this is being delivered as a student to the faculty in the context of a graded assignment. So say someone gave the assignment of like, critique the class or have a critique on the academic climate in general, right? Some instructor wants to get people thinking. So you are doing this from now a student's perspective. The purpose is to explain why discussion board assignments are non-beneficial to students and propose perhaps a workable alternative. And for context, when I specifically mean discussion board assignments, I mean when you go into Canvas or Blackboard or Moodle or whatever software you have, those assignments where it's like you will post in a Blackboard and respond to two other students' posts on the discussion board, and you have to have this many words. And what it typically boils down to is the student is like, I think this was a thing, and the other two go, I agree, I also think this was a thing. And it tends to just feel like busy work to a lot of people. Every instructor I've talked to doesn't like it either. So this is probably not the hottest of take, but this is specifically in the sense that you are critiquing something that a teacher has built and rolled out. So there is now perhaps room for friction here, right? So going off of that, I'm going to take us over to our next poll everywhere, and it should just carry over from the one you're on. So if I go here, because it's the same link, and present, things might have tweaked, but you should be good to throw up some strategies and attributes again for this one, and we'll probably get to talk about this a little bit more than the previous one. Okay, mimicking. Ooh, okay, that's interesting. Let me get a few more up here. Time management, all right. Responsive, very good. Non-confrontational, very nice. Involved, formal, passion, yeah. Speak seriously. Objectivity, okay. Oh, confusion, okay. Busy work, yeah, okay. So as people are putting these in, and they're kind of shuffling around a little bit, I would love to know the who put in mimicry and what was your reasoning behind that? Because that could go multiple different ways, and I'm very curious as to what the thought process was behind it. And you could verbally or in the chat, whatever is easiest for you. Being polite, of course, of course. No wrong answers. I like that. Collaboration helping. Okay. Informal group discussions. So politeness obviously has been one of the highlights, and that makes sense, right? We're not here to be super confrontational or cause a lot of friction, but really, yeah, relatability. So what are some things you guys have put in, and what was your reasoning behind them specifically?
Just to let you know, I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now.
Okay.
I'll keep you posted.
Cool. I can be patient. Takes time to type.
I guess my reasoning behind I put non-confrontational, and the reason was just generally professors don't usually take it well, even if you, in a nice way, say like, hey, that thing you're doing might not be the most effective for student learning. So just approaching it from a point of view of like, I totally understand, why you're doing it that way. I know you want students to discuss. Could I suggest an alternate form that kind of accomplishes the same goals in a way that's more engaging to students?
Yeah, I think that's really good input. And you're right. Like, going, hey, this thing you're doing is unhelpful and feels like busy work. Like, even if they're not the biggest fan of maybe that form of assignment, right? Like maybe that was something that was dictated as part of the curriculum from the school. And so they have to have a certain number in the course, so they don't have a ton of choice in it. But yeah, you don't want to approach it from an angle of like, this is just objectively bad. Like giving, and again, having those like alternative methods of like, here's another way we could do this thing. Because, at the end of the day, something you brought up that I really like is that you as the student are acknowledging, I can see what you as the instructor are trying to do. I can see why you've assigned this assignment in this way. I can tell what you want the end result to be. And so being like, here's an alternate way that might work better for that end result coming from a student's perspective is really helpful and would probably go over better than this is busy work. I don't like doing this. What other comments do we have? Any other reasoning behind what people are laying out up here?
Well, one thing you could suggest is making it a two-part kind of assignment. So the discussion board actually preps you for in-person work that you're doing. And of course, if it's an online class, or that would have to be accomplished through Zoom. But if you do have to do a discussion board, having that be a two-step process is useful.
That I really like that. That's clever, because I think that's the other thing that makes it feel like busy work, especially with discussion boards in particular, is it kind of starts and stops after like you've posted in 2 comments and then that's it and it never comes up again. So making it part of a larger process, right? That means there's skin in the game. That means what you put down in these discussion boards is going to have an effect later, and that puts some importance in it. So that I like that as a way to even be like, okay, if we have to work within the confines of doing this kind of assignment, how do we make it matter? Is really interesting. We got some things coming in chat.
Yeah, we've got a couple. Rin, I hope I'm saying their name correctly. Rin wrote depth of understanding. I think sometimes students only try to meet the grading criteria of discussion boards, which might not translate into fully grasping the topic they're discussing.
Mm-hmm.
And Alejandro wrote interest. Shows the faculty that we aren't just looking to complain. Instead, we wish to provide a better alternative and wish to participate in its change.
I like that.
And there's one more from Christian. Collaboration, no wrong answers, informal. Students should be able to participate in an in-person group discussion on course content to promote critical thinking. There was a reason philosophers would gather together back in the day to think.
You're right. And I love that the like overarching theme from these comments is like student engagement with the course and the course material, and showing like, hey, we're not just here to like get the grade and the college credit and move on. Like we actually do want to learn, And so approaching it from that angle of like, we're not doing this just because we don't like doing coursework. We're coming at this from the angle of like, we want to improve our learning experience so that we can get the most out of this class academically, not just, again, for grades or for college credits, is huge. And even just bringing that up would probably make an instructor a little bit more open to criticism, because at the end of the day, everyone's got different learning styles, so no course is going to fit every single student, but different approaches or varied approaches are typically more helpful than just, a one and done method. So I love the discussion about like, letting people come together and discuss things in person as well, not just online, because then you can have that actual back and forth. When it's very linear with discussion boards, right? You put your post and then you have like 2 comments, and it's like a train and it goes one way and there's not a whole lot of back and forth typically. So yeah, no, you're thinking, and this is some really good stuff. I'm gonna go ahead and
Before you change over, we do have from Jocelyn about mimicking. Would you like to hear that right now?
I would love to, yes.
Jocelyn wrote, I included mimicking because although it could be good to create a sense of connection, it often leads to other students being insincere.
Right. Yeah. I see that. Yeah, with that issue within, I'm really glad you clarified, because I think I misunderstood what you meant by mimicking. I took that as like you, the student, are mimicking the instructor in some way to show that like this isn't how it should work. So I'm very glad that you clarified that. That makes a lot more sense. Yes, students mimicking each other as a form of like forced connection, which is how you lead to, yes, I also agree that the sky is blue post. So I thank you for clarifying that. And yes, that is also an issue that would need to be brought up in this discussion. I'm going to go ahead and take us to the next one. We'll probably get through this third one, and then I have some just closing, again, application tips that I want to have a few minutes to touch on, and then we'll probably do any like lingering questions, depending on how long this next one takes. So, taking us over to number 3. This one's a wild card. I'm excited for feedback on this one. Audience is friends, family, and extended acquaintances at a wedding. The topic is the bride and groom's relationship, and the purpose is the best man speech / toast. So congratulations, you're all best man at this fictitious person's wedding. You have to give like the groom speech, the best man speech. There's a lot of different ways we can approach this. So taking us completely out of academia now and putting us in what is straight up just an interpersonal thing. And for context, you know probably most people at this wedding, but not every single person. And I would say it's a pretty decently sized wedding. So you're not presenting to a small crowd of like 20 people. We would say there's a pretty solid swath of guests here. So going off of that then, carrying us over to number 3. How would you do best man speech? Sarcasm. Okay. All right. We've already got a dichotomy here. Right off the bat, we have you should be funny, but thoughtful. Sarcastic and thoughtfulness, typically oil and water. They don't have to be, but they tend to not mix super well. I like that humor takes up so much screen space. Gentle mockery. That's delightful. We're going to circle around to that. That's great. Okay, wingman angle. Thoughtfulness. Ethos, pathos, logos. There we go. We have definitely some writing tutors in here. It's great to see. Sentimental. Okay. Heartfelt. Heartfelt's getting some traction now. Respectfulness. Kindness. Happy for them. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. Mockery, parentheses, gently is very funny to me because to me that reads like an ingredient, like garlic, comma, minced. So this is I like the presentation of that. Okay, so I'm noticing we have a dichotomy here. We have two potential paths, and that's not to say they're strictly mutually exclusive. There's a world where we can do both, but it's going to take a little work. So we have basically you could go the like kind of humor, sarcastic, like yeah, when me and Joe Schmo were in college together, blah blah blah. You know, where probably that wingman would also come in versus you also have like the heartfelt and the thoughtful and the sentimental, maybe even a little nostalgic, right? Like, yes, when, you know, John Doe and Jane Doe first met, they were like, you could see the sparks fly and, you know, insert story about when you were younger, when, you know, bride and groom were first dating. So, yeah, we got warmth, memorable, authentic. So we have, again, two very different approaches. And again, if you really know what you're doing and you're comfortable with your audience and you know the groom really well, you can do both. You can kind of break it up and interchange both. So that leads me to open the floor to all of you then, and of course, written comments, verbal comments, what have you. You don't have to worry about raising your hand. Just turn on your mic and go. Why would we pick one over the other? If you, the individual, were legit going to deliver a speech like this at a wedding, would you take the humor route? Would you take the like thoughtful and gentle and like happy for the memorable route, or would you try to mix your meats a little bit? What's the approach?
I would begin with the humor and build through that, and then end with the touching and thoughtful. That's where you kind of at the end of it's where you kind of wish them well on their life. So I think beginning with the humor and ending with the thoughtful would be my goal.
I like that. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And that shows like that thoughtfulness for like the narrative that you're doing through the speech, right? It starts off kind of silly, goofy, kind of the way a lot of us would start when we're younger, right? And then you hook people with the humor. You go, I remember when, John Doe and I got up to shenaniganery in, I don't know, 2015 or something. And then you can transition to, and then he met bride and he really settled down and like grew into his own and, became the lovely person he is today. And that like kind of curve almost from like, we're going from humor to pull people in and get everyone's attention to like, now we're going to be thoughtful and gentle and wish them well on their marriage going forward that's narrative work. I really like that. What else we got?
Just piggybacking off of that, I feel like that's also helpful for the nervous speaker because you get up there and you can like play a little bit at first and get like your uncomfortableness out with yourself being in front of everyone, and then you can settle into like the heartfelt stuff.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I think that's a good method for speakers who maybe are not the most comfortable with it. And it's also like, especially if this gets dropped on them, like not last minute, but maybe they didn't prep as much as they should. Opening with some jokes can almost give you a little time to like, okay, what are some very conscious and thoughtful things that I can come up with, right? If you're having to do this impromptu, which hopefully you're not, but in the case that you are, I did one time. It's okay. It happens. You want to be able to like be thoughtful about your specific examples and that like the really happy for them, like wish them well stuff and be specific with it. So giving yourself some time by like starting off with some jokes and then circling back, especially if you can connect something thoughtful at the end with a joke you made at the beginning, like people love that. People eat that up. Why do you think every stand-up comedian ever always like ends their routine on a callback to a joke they made at the start? People like it when you come full circle. What else have we got? Any new comments in chat or still waiting on those?
I don't see anything in chat right now, Addie.
Cool. Right. Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? Let's go. Okay, we got about 10 minutes. In the interest of not rushing, I'm gonna call this one here. So we'll go back to the rest of the stuff, and then we'll have like maybe a couple minutes for questions at the very, very tail end. Because I want to be conscious of time and not push anything back. But thank you guys for participating in that little experiment of mine. A lot of good, thoughtful like answers. I really like how people were approaching this from the angle of, you're not just doing this assuming that you know everything about your topic, right? The wedding one, being cognizant of like someone might be a little nervous speaking, so start with the humor to build up to that. And then on the one for the discussion boards, right? approaching it from the angle of like, we're students, we want to learn the most from this, and this is not helping us learn. So what's a different way we can approach this? And even just the different ways to make discussion boards work by attaching them to larger projects is you guys were really great. So thank you so much for engaging with all of that. We're going to skip project 4. I want to get straight into some of the like application tips for tutors. So when it comes to stuff for tutors, for situations, right, this kind of stuff is really helpful for workshops, because as you all have worked in the academic field, like you picked up on some things and you probably have enough that you could put together a workshop on something like I'm doing here. Something for, could be chemistry, could be biology, whatever your like subject of study is. I love a good workshop because that gets people like kind of working together. If you can get students to like really engage with it. But if you're not used to speaking in front of groups, it's a little nerve-wracking. So being able to present as like knowledgeable in this sense is really important. Also good for group tutoring sessions and non-student facing trainings, right? I'm the tutoring specialist at CWI, so I work a lot on stuff that has to do with like within our department and stuff that the students don't see because it's for the other tutors. And so it basically the students see the results of the work, but they don't necessarily see the work itself. So when you are presenting something, or even if you present something asynchronously, you're like pre-recording a video of like, this is how you navigate our website. Being able to present as like knowledgeable and confident in things is really helpful. And a nice thing about when you do things asynchronously through a video is that you can do multiple takes. So if you're not happy with how you present it, if you kind of tripped over your words at one point, you can go back and do it again. You can be extra picky when it's pre-recorded. For application for tutors, the big things you want to like present is you want to be knowledgeable, you want to be approachable, you want to be professional, and you want to show that you have expertise. And these things are not mutually exclusive, but they can overlap a little bit. So it's really, really important to always present as educated enough to have an answer, but never so lofty as to be off-putting to students. And as much as this seems like it's just a courtesy thing, which like it is a courtesy, right? We don't ever want to seem like we're going to go, oh, that's a stupid question. There are no stupid questions. We know that. We as like a tutoring body all know that like we would not say something like that. But students might not necessarily think that. Not even of your fault. They might have their own anxiety, which brings us around to this isn't just a courtesy thing. This is also an accessibility thing. If you can present yourself as like, yes, I'm knowledgeable, but I'm also friendly and on your level, then, students with issues like chronic anxiety or social anxiety, things like that, they're going to be a lot more open to coming to you for help. So this isn't just a matter of like being nice and courteous, even though we of course want that. But this is also for like, your super high strung caffeine like loaded student who typically takes online courses and doesn't usually talk to people in person. And they're anxious about this kind of thing. If you can present yourself as like, yes, I'm friendly and I am approachable, that's going to like lower that barrier to entry to them so much. You will get more students by presenting that way. As far as application for students, let me make sure. Yeah, okay, I've still got a little bit of time. For students, for situation, this is helpful for like presentation assignments, or if you have maybe a faculty meeting, so you have to go in for office hours or something, or even student-driven events. Anyone who's part of any extracurricular or clubs, this is super, super helpful. For application, the big thing is you want to communicate confidence. Highlight practice and forethought is a really big thing, because a lot of students think, I'll just improv it and wing it, and the instructor won't be able to tell. The instructor can usually tell. So it's important to use these methods to communicate that, like, yes, I did do the work ahead of time and write this out and research it properly. And there are also, of course, as a student, a little bit more opportunities to get creative with it. But you also need to know the situation. Only do that for appropriate assignments, and don't lose points with an instructor who it won't appeal to. If your instructor's maybe a little bit more dry, isn't super into like over the topness or humor, then, don't necessarily over-engineer it for that. Also, don't mask a lack of knowledge with an abundance of theatrics. And again, don't go over the top for the subject. Again, it really depends on what you're talking about. An example of where it is appropriate to maybe get a little silly with it was there was once a Com 101 speech I heard about that the topic was cannibalism, and all of the transitions were various food-related puns, like we're going to have an appetizer of the first main point, then we're going to dig into the second main point, and then chow down on the third main point, and then go into conclusion for dessert. And if something like that, there's a certain amount of absurdity that you can get away with that. But if you're going to talk about something that's super, super serious, don't do puns. That should be a no-brainer. Some people don't necessarily think that though. So, again, be respectful to your topic. Going off of all of that, that brings us to my references slide, which means we have a couple minutes. Are there any lingering questions from anyone?
There's nothing in the chat right now adding, but feel
All
free
right.
all to add questions there or unmic and ask directly.
Yeah. Now I'll give a second because I don't type super fast, so I typically need a moment myself. So we'll just give it just a second in case anything comes in on chat. But I appreciate everyone's, again, engagement with this presentation. This would not have been near as interesting or educational if people weren't like going for it. So I really appreciate everyone's thoughtful answers to things and their further input on what we talked about today. So thank you all for being here and being present, being a part of this. This has been a lot of fun. Anything else? Any last call for questions? All right. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it there then. Oh, that one thing. Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad I'm really happy with the turnout and that everyone was, putting in things on the poll everywhere, and that we had so much like thoughtful contribution. So you guys made the presentation like really come together. I laid the foundation, but you guys helped build it up. So it was a team effort. So thank you everyone for coming out today. And I think I'm gonna probably wrap it there. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you at the I'll be in the audience of the keynote speech. So I will see you soon.